Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about the phrase, is it possible that? In particular, in the context of conspiracy theories, because this is a distinct rhetorical move that conspiracy theorists often use to try and build their arguments. And I think it's really important to be critically aware of the limitations of, is it possible that? So what sort of prompted me thinking more about this, I was watching a program, rewatching a program, The Naked Archaeologist with Simcha Yakupovich. I think it's a really good show. I really enjoy it. I don't think Simcha is a conspiracy theorist, but there are also instances in which he has a desired conclusion that he wants to reach, and so he will sometimes attempt to arrange facts in such a way that they support his conclusion, even if the sort of overall bulk of the evidence suggests it's wrong. So it's not the most consistently responsible project. Well, all of Simcha's shows that I've seen do run into this on occasion. Yeah. I don't think he's a conspiracy theorist, though. I don't think that his interpretations or his sometimes misrepresentations rise to the level of conspiracy theory, so much as it's a believer trying to prove that the things he believes are true. And in this case, a reasonably mainstream religious believer. So, but because he does sometimes attempt to prove things that are probably not true because he believes them and wants them to be true, rhetorically, he does sometimes stray into this conspiracy theory territory. But we see this much more with programs like Ancient Aliens, which are overtly conspiracy theories. We see this a lot with ancient high technology arguments, things like this. So I'm personally most familiar with pseudo-history and pseudo-archaeology arguments because I watch a lot of programs debunking those, as well as some pseudoscience things like flat Earth and young Earth creationism, biblical literalism, things like this. One of the phrases that you often hear, especially in something like the History Channel's Ancient Aliens series, is the phrase, is it possible that? And again, what prompted me to think about this is that in the Naked Archaeologist episode about Masada, Simcha uses the phrase, is it possible that? In order to build his argument that there were early Christians at Masada, despite the fact that there is zero evidence for it. Like, there is speculation by some people that there could have been early Christians there, but it's not based on any archaeological or historical evidence. It's not necessarily a bad supposition, but it is a supposition and nothing more. And this is really the problem with the phrase, is it possible that? Is this substitutes something like, is it probable? Is it likely? Is it supported by evidence that? Now, those would all be much stronger foundations for an argument. If I say it is probable that whatever my argument is, whatever my position is, then I'm making a stronger statement about the likely truth value. If I say, is it possible, then I'm meeting the minimum bar for truth. Because essentially, so part of the reason that conspiracy theorists like this phrase, is it possible that, is because often saying no would require the other side to prove a negative. And that's generally very difficult, particularly in areas like history, archaeology, the distant past, as well as sort of metaphysical things like the existence of a deity or deities. Yeah, it's possible. I can't 100% prove that there wasn't an ancient society with incredibly advanced technology. I can't sort of go back through all of Earth's history frame by frame and prove beyond any shadow of a possible doubt, not even a reasonable doubt, a possible doubt, that such a thing never existed. And so the problem becomes when pseudoscientists, pseudo-historians, pseudo-archaeologists, whatever it is, take, yes, it's possible to mean that is evidence that that's the way it was, or that's the way it is. In the case of pseudo-scientists, often. That's simply not a working equation. Possible is not a truth statement. If I said it's probable, that means it's likely true. If I say it's definite, that means it's concretely true. We know that for a verifiable fact. But possible simply means it cannot 100% be disproven, even if it can 99% be disproven. And so this is the very barest minimum bar that one would need to meet in order to support an idea. And the problem is conspiracy theorists often meet that absolute minimum bar and then proceed as though their case is established. If it's possible, then it's true, is more or less the equation here. And I think if you consider critically for just a minute, you can tell why that's a bad idea. Many, many, many things are possible that are not true. You can have two things, both of which are possible, but would be mutually exclusive. If one is true, the other can't be true. Both are still possible. And so if you set the minimum bar of, is it possible, and then equate that to, it must then be true, then you have conflicting truths that are existing, because possibility doesn't equal truth. And so this is part of the thing. This is the specious reasoning of many conspiracy theorists, is you can't absolutely prove that it isn't true, and therefore I'm going to treat it as true. This is kind of a species of the argument from ignorance, which is a logical fallacy. And for those of you who are not familiar with logical fallacies, basically this is a fault in reasoning. It is a failure of the logic of an argument for whatever reason. And there's a number of different logical fallacies. The argument from ignorance is one of them. And basically the argument from ignorance goes, we don't know for sure, and so we should take my position. The is it possible that argument is essentially doing the same kind of thing. Because you can't absolutely prove me wrong, I am therefore going to proceed as though I'm right. And again, this is a bad way of reasoning because it substitutes, here's what I want to be true, for here's what the evidence says is true. The evidence says there was no ancient high technology civilization. There's simply no good evidence for it that is not better explained by the archaeological record, by anthropology, by history, and by experimental archaeology. It's possible that ancient aliens came and influenced human society, human civilization, but there's no evidence for it. Whereas there's a massive amount of evidence suggesting a natural development of technology with drop-offs and recoveries, etc., etc., all of which makes perfect historical sense. Is it possible that there were early Christians at Masada? Yes, but there's no evidence for it. The evidence says that the people who were there were Jews. Now, you can make the claim that early Christians would be sufficiently indistinguishable from Jews to make it impossible to differentiate, and that's fine. That's a legitimate claim, but that's not evidence that there were early Christians at Masada. So this is the thing. This is the problem with the way that the "is it possible that" phrasing works, is it takes the outside chance that something could maybe be correct, as though that's evidence that it is correct. And that simply doesn't hold up to scrutiny, particularly because this type of argument generally relies on ignoring large amounts of evidence that suggest that the thing that's possible is not true. And so this is a very, very common rhetorical trick among conspiracy theorists. And so generally, I would say when you hear the phrase, "is it possible that?" your ears should perk up, because this may not be true.